As much as there is an Azeroth, there will be hope. And with hope comes new character and adventures, but with these two together, it forms a kind of a lore that must always be remembered. This is the story of the Blood Elves. Hi everyone, I believe that everyone already watched my video about the new Blood Elf model. If you didn't see it, I will link it in the description below. If you have any questions about them or you don't have any clue of what I am talking about, please leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it. With this out of the way, let us proceed. You must know that the Blood Elves, also known as the Sin'dorei, are a bit kind of the grandchildren of the Highborn. During the War of the Ancients, a group of Highborn defected Queen Azshara and helped the Night Elves in their fight. This rebellion was led by Dathramar's Sunstrider, that later, after the War of the Ancients, he saw how the Night Elf society dropped and banned the powers of the arcane, and embraced the powers of druidism in its place. Lor'themar was not happy with this choice, so he confronted the Night Elves, calling them cowards for dropping a source of power so valuable as the arcane was. Then he picked up the rest of his people, and then left to Kalimdor, taking the eastern path. Arriving in the eastern kingdoms, the Highborn, now called themselves the High Elves, met the primitive human tribes. They set camp in various places, like Tirisfal Glades, northern Lordaeron, and they kept heading up to north of the continent. They finally found a new place to settle down and call home. Then kael'thas, meaning High Kingdom or High Home, came to be. Their architecture was simple but beautiful. They've constructed their structures in order to coexist with nature, and then, with a vial full of water of the original Well of Eternity, they have created the Sunwell. That would empower them for the using of the arcane magic. But they didn't want to bring over another War of the Ancients, so this time they decided to mask their lands with a protective barrier which would still allow them to work their enchantments. They constructed a series of monolithic runestones at various points around kael'thas, which marked the boundaries of the magic barrier. The runestones not only masked the elves' magic from extra-dimensional threats, but helped to frighten away superstitious troll war bands as well. Kael'thas had become the shining jewel that the elves had longed to create. Then, years later, began the Troll Wars. That began when the Amani trolls returned and saw that their territory was now occupied by the elves. And for that, the trolls started to attack the elves. Keep in mind that the trolls outnumbered the elves from 10 to 1. They could regenerate parts of their bodies, so this made the elves seek help from the humans. Taught them the ways of magic and arcane wielding so they could help them. After this, the first war occurred. The Horde took over Stormwind. The humans had to go north and form a new alliance with the races they knew, making the Alliance of Lordaeron. The humans now needed the help of the elves now, and the elves, now led by Anastarian's Sunstrider, had a debt to fulfill. So they provided the humans with a couple of their troops led by Illyria Windrunner, the older sister of Sylvanas and Varissa Windrunner. The second war ended, and years later Arthas picked up Frostmourne, killed his father King Terenas, and marched with the Scourge to kael'thas, destroying every defense of the High Elves, causing the Dead Scar to get to their most precious possession, the Sunwell, and resurrect kael'thas now as a Lich. In the process, Arthas killed Sylvanas and converted her into a Banshee and left. Now the High Elves were doomed, the Sunwell was corrupt, their king was dead, and kael'thas in ruin. When word of kael'thas' fall reached Dalaran, Prince Kiltha's Sunstrider, now the last of his bloodline, returned to his homeland and gathered all the survivors he could. The elves rejoined the Alliance armies, where they called themselves Blood Elves in honor of their fallen, but Alliance began to look down on their elven comrades. Grand Marshal Garithos, the leader of the Alliance remnants, became giving to the Blood Elves tasks beneath their capabilities, suicidal missions even. Kael'thas met Tyrande Whisperwind and Maiev Shadowsong, who offered to help Kael'thas in return for aid in tracking down Illidan. However, a bit after this, Tyrande stepped downriver while fending off hordes of the undead. Later, Kael'thas was forced to rely on the aid of Lady Vashj and her Naga. When Marshal Garithos discovered that Kael'thas had accepted aid from the Naga, he sentenced them to death for treason. Right after that, Kael'thas and his comrades were rescued by Lady Vashj and her Naga, who took them to Illidan in the wastes of Outlands with the promise of as much magic as they required. Kael'thas pledged the loyalty of the Blood Elves to Illidan's cause, settling in Outland with the rest of Illidan's forces. Kael'thas sent a magister named Romath back to kael'thas, with the promise that Kael'thas would one day return to lead the Blood Elves to the paradise. Romath joined with the Regent Lord lor'themar Terran and Alderon Brightwing, who had been reclaiming kael'thas from the Scourge little by little. Roma informed him of Kael'thas' command to prepare the Blood Elves for their journey into the Promised Land beyond the Dark Portal to aid in that task. Roma, alongside the Blood Elf Magi, pushed nearly all the undead from Eversong Woods and used powerful magics to rebuild the eastern half of the ruined city of Silvermoon to serve as the Blood Elven capital on Azeroth. Now, the Alliance viewing them as traitors, kael'thas was turned to the Horde. Out of necessity, the Forsaken in particular are staunch supporters of the Blood Elves membership in the Horde because Sylvanas herself, before dying, was an elf too. So they almost forced the Blood Elves to join the Horde if they wanted protection, even if lor'themar didn't want to send his people to war again. But do not forget that in the game we can still see some High Elves. They are members of the Alliance, but the biggest amount of them are members and reside within the Kirin Tor, being completely neutral to either faction, until Jaina Proudmoore became their leader. Now you may be asking, why do the Blood Elves have green eyes and the High Elves blue eyes? Well, the Blood Elves had their Sunwell corrupt. They needed some kind of magic to fulfill their hunger for arcane energy, and while Kael'thas went after that cure for the corruption, his people started to feed into fel magic. And as you might know, exposure to fel magic made the orcs green, but in the case of the elves, it made their eyes go from blue to green. And that's all, everyone. If you have any questions about the topic I've just talked, please feel free to write in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you like my videos, and have an awesome one.